I had the mic off because they were chit-chattering, so take two.
One time. Welcome. Good evening. We are super happy to have you join us this evening online, as well as those people who decided to join us in person. We recognize that tonight is a super busy evening. There's all kinds of things going on. There is simply no time in the spring when we don't have lots of things going on. So we are very happy to have you this evening for our Everything I Learned Was from a Gifted Child, everything I needed to know. And we have a panel with this evening of experts. They know gifted children inside and out. I am going to ask them in just a minute to introduce themselves. They're going to tell you their name, they're going to tell you the school that they represent, and they're also going to tell you the grade level that they're teaching. So we have a kind of a range this evening. We tried to get everything from pre-K all the way up. So we do have a range of teachers, which is always great. So my name is Karen Brown, and we're going to get started.
I am going to ask you guys to speak up because the way this room is designed, you are going to have to speak a little louder than you might normally think. Thank you.
All right. So Aimee, would you like to start introducing yourself?
Do we need to stand or we kind of?
No, you're
fine.
Great. Aimee Bolenbach, I am the gifted specialist at Desert Trails Elementary School, where I teach reading and math gifted content replacement for grades 4, 5, and 6.
I'm Debbie Arn. I teach 4th grade comprehensive gifted at Sonoran Scott.
My name is Molly Etchebarren. I teach the preschool or pre-K comprehensive gifted at Fireside Elementary.
My name is Brenna Taylor. I am the gifted specialist at Hill Elementary School in content replacement with 4th, 5, and 6th grade. I am Leslie Martin. I also do content replacement. I am at North Branch and I do 4th and 6th grade. My name is Ashley Pantier, and I teach comprehensive gifted 5th, 6th grade at Sky Crossing. So it's a multi-age with 2 grade levels.
All right. So we have a number of questions this evening, 6 to be exact. We were kind and let them see the questions ahead of time so they can kind of be thinking about the things that they want to share. So I'm going to start with the first question. We will not ask each of you to answer the question, so you don't have to. We're not going down the row. It's okay.
One of you.
But we will just take an opportunity for each of you to share if you would like to. So first question, what is one piece of advice you give to gifted children? What advice you give to the kid?
I would say, and maybe stated more subtly, but they're not necessarily going to be the best in their class anymore. When they leave, gen ed and come to a gifted class, they're kind of all at the top of their groups. So there's a lot of stress and a lot of tears that they have to navigate when they realize this is hard for the first time, or I have to take more steps than I've ever had to take before, or everyone got the same great grade that I got. So it's a process that they have to deal with, and usually happens in 4th grade, but they definitely have to work through that.
Well, I'll piggyback on that, like that making mistakes and having bumps in the road are part of the learning process. That's going to be okay. And it's sometimes in 4th grade, it's the first time they've had that struggle. And so just working through it like that.
I think too, there's this identity I think they bring into our rooms, especially those of us that just get them for the first time in 4th grade, that they only see themselves as smart. Like when I ask them what does gifted mean to you, almost all the time, they're like, it's because I'm smart. And I'm always like, no, yes, you are. But like, you're here because you think differently, and that we, tailor our instruction to different thinking. And I always tell my kids that smart is something you have to earn. That like everybody can earn smart, but you have to be willing to do it and to not give up when it suddenly becomes really hard for the first time, maybe ever. So.
All right, well, thank you. So in your classroom, how do you support that neurodiverse learner? For that child?
I would say that having a structured classroom where there's predictability and routines is beneficial, as well as having various modes of learning for different learning styles. Also hands-on activities that are engaging and build upon their interests. Creating an environment where all learners feel safe and understood and excited to explore. And also allowing time for communication, whether it's feelings or the content. It
All those things are great. I teach fourth grade and I like to give a lot of choice in what the kids do. Obviously, we have a curriculum we follow, so they don't get to just do whatever they want. But like with math word problems, maybe they get to choose the two that they're going to write up, or the science fair, they choose their topic. When you do a literature study, they choose their project. And giving them that autonomy is a lot of, they're much more engaged, I think, because they enjoy more of what they're doing. And then I also like to just keep up as much as possible with neurodiversity stuff. I read about it a lot. I listen to the podcast. I find neuroscience pretty fascinating, and then I explicitly share it with the kids because I think it helps them even as young as fourth grade to understand. Oh, my brain works this way. If I study this way, it works better. If I do it this way, it doesn't work as well. Oh, I'm this kind of a learner. So, giving them that information, I think, helps them a lot.
I would add on to that this group of kids needs time to process things, not really academics at all. They get that super fast, but you know, if there's an incident or the assembly was too loud or there's overstimulation, I think we have the ability to kind of pause and process that with them and talk through it and share some of those feelings that a lot of us had in the room and just sort of work through it so we can settle back down and then get back.
Well, and I think diverse is the key word in neurodiverse because our classrooms are filled with everyone, from the jock to the kids who want to have a chess competition. And so I think a lot of times we get the stigma, especially in our comprehensive gifted program, that there's a certain type of kid in our class and there really isn't. It's such a big mix. And I feel like that's something that isn't always talked about. Like in my class, we just did like a March Madness statistical research, right? And the kids are into sports. It's just because they're in my room doesn't mean they're not like watching basketball. So I think the diverse part is so important too.
Thank you. All right. What is your favorite win from this school year? And what do you enjoy most about working with gifted kids? Favorite win this year, the thing that you just look at and go, yes.
Promise I'm not gonna talk every question, but I think there's a gift that a lot of us get that we have with kids, a lot of us for multiple years. And so, like, this is my third year at this current school, and this is my third year with my sixth graders. And there's something super special about that. Like, they're family, and you're in their circle, and they tell you things they're gonna tell other people. And I think it just comes back to that, like, building rapport with them.
It is a relationship. It is a relationship like none other.
It really is.
Because you do get to have them as a gifted specialist for multiple years. That was the one thing that I loved about being a gifted specialist. Was I watched them mature in front of my very eyes. And that was so fun.
And it makes the win sometimes so much, not that, of course, like with our, like those of us that get them in fourth grade and move with them. Not that the wins in fourth grade are less, of course, but when you see a child that's struggling, like my biggest win this year is I have a student in fifth grade that last year in fourth grade really like walked in the door and I was like, this is my perfectionist. Like of all my perfectionists, this is my, like he is going to melt down if there's something wrong. And on my board all year, I have written 85% equals mastery because I think there's this stigma, and I grew up in this district in gifted ed. And I was that kid that was like, if it's not 100% like game over, you know, my life is over. And as I've grown up and learned, and I, you know, that that's not realistic and that they're not robots and they're not perfect. And so I write that on my board all year. And that was a really hard fight last year for him. And so this year, kind of midway through second quarter, we had done a math unit test and he had gotten an 87. And when they got their scores back, I was kind of waiting to see how that was gonna go. And he saw it and he paused and he was like, oh. And his friend was like, what'd you get? And of course they're looking, which I'm always like, don't, yeah. But, and he was like, oh, and he, my sweet perfectionist paused and he was like, that's okay. That's still about mastery though. I still have mastery and I feel good about that. And I, oh my gosh. Yes, you know, that there is, you know, and what a big win that would have been in fourth grade, but to even see that like it can change and it does matter and that they are able to overcome those things and just, I'm excited to see next year even like how much more of that for him there's gonna be.
It's saying, hey, it's a little different. This is the first thought of them that they're in a structured environment and that they're presented with things that, I mean, obviously, we all need things day to day that are challenging, but academically are concepts that might be new to them. So there is still that gifted perfectionist in there. But they're realizing it at such a young age, and the emotion does come with it too. And so I have a couple of boy and a girl that very much have that in them. And I would just say the greatest win is when you work with them through coping strategies like breathing or talking about, okay, what's the worst case scenario? If we don't understand this and we get it wrong, what we've learned, you know, and let's move forward, and it's okay to make a mistake. But just to see like the joy and the pride when they finally can master that concept, it's a win for them and it's a win for me. That's my favorite. And I would say my favorite part about teaching gifted learners is just their excitement for learning, whether a lot of my students have particular things that they're interested in. And I learn every single day from them, whether it's Star Wars or Harry Potter or animals, whatever their interests are. I'm learning right along with them and we can piggyback on what they know and build from there. So that's
Well, I would say like, just ending third quarter and I did something in my class called March Book Madness, you know, the basketball, but, and they get presented 16 books, I ask them to read several of them, and then it just goes, and they have these conversations that you don't even plan about books. So I mean, like as a teacher, I'm like, yay, we're talking about books, like books win, you know, and I don't even plan it. How did you like that book? The character was this, and I'm like, oh, interesting. What do you think? And you can go into this whole discussion, and they are still, can I still read those books? I'm like, yes, please read them. You know, but they just have this love, and now they're like, so what's going to be next year? I'm like, I don't know. I didn't create the list. Like, we have to wait till October, you know. So, but they're so excited to read, you know. And some of them, it's authors they would never choose, books they would never pick up, and now they have a love of new authors and new titles, and they're having conversations, debates about books, you know, so I can't argue with it.
I don't know that I have a biggest win, but I have probably a favorite win. Sky Crossing, our program is new this year, so the 5-6 is new. And so we've gotten kids from kind of all over and a couple who have never been in a gifted program. And when you watch them, like a couple weeks into school and they're like, I found my people, like that's the win for me. And I have one in particular, like, I have no idea how he hasn't been in the program his entire career, because he is the epitome, like, just goes in everything. He really loves war and like all the war history, and he can tell you anything. So that's probably my favorite win. And then my favorite thing about gifted education, I've never taught regular ed. I've been a gifted ed my entire time. This is my 11th year. And I just love the conversations you can have with them. And I never have I don't plan more than like a week out, because we could go on a tangent and this project could last 3 weeks instead of 1 week. And so it's really fun to hear their conversations, and, you know, they talk a lot about relationships. And I am still in contact with students from years ago. I just had like a reunion hangout at the park last Friday, and they all come from the really tall high schoolers to the ones who are just now in 7th grade and feel like they're really cool, but they just left like 20 minutes ago. And so this has gone for so awesome. And why?
I have this question. I was like, I can't think of one. I can never pick a favorite. I really like seeing the kids excited. So it's fun for me when we have our science fair, and they have gotten really excited about their project. We just wrote they just wrote coattails, and it's just delightful to see the things that they come up with. And I think because I love learning new things, I love kids. There's always stuff, like every day. There are things that I had no idea about that they know, or just that they're doing something in a way. So I'm constantly learning about.
All right, great. So we've talked about how much fun it is to teach gifted kids. But anyone who's worked with gifted children for any length of time, or anyone who is the parent of a gifted child, you know that this is not all a world of fun and games. Rainbows and sunshine, yeah, sometimes there's some storm clouds. So what do you see as the challenges for gifted learners beyond their academics? I mean, we talked about the fact that, you know, suddenly realizing that you're not the smartest child in the whole world is a challenge for them. But even beyond academics, we'll talk a little bit about academics in a minute, but beyond the academics, what do you see the challenges that you can face in your classroom?
We talked earlier about the neurodivergence, and I think that Ashley said, I think people look, sometimes other teachers will look at us and be like, oh, and the assumption is that they're all like at this level, which they're not. There's an incredible range, especially in comprehensive, because some of them are coming into the program this year, they are jumping to math or whatever. So there is a lot of differentiating that we have to do with these kids. And then there's a lot of social and emotional struggles. The research isn't great yet on the correlation is just correlative, but I think we all know that there's a lot of anxiety, there's depression, there's perfectionism, there's undermotivation, and all of those things are in every class that we've had. And maybe if you're them, the kids can, sometimes they can't learn if those other things are happening. So there's a lot of wearing many hats other than just teaching.
Well, and that social emotional need too, it's the strong sense of justice that comes, and you know that plays big into the playground. And so I know someone else mentioned, you know, having those conversations about what happened on the playground and taking time for that, because the 4 square rule is not what the 4 square rule was yesterday, and I don't understand how you could change it to this in one day. And so, you know, there's a period of time in my class where they have time to play board games. And is that a standard? Yeah, sure. It's a social emotional standard because they need to learn how to lose and how not to throw the game board in the air when the trouble game doesn't go their way. And so we spend time doing those things, and other teachers are like, oh, they just play games with that. No, they actually made this. And so I think that's a big piece, is taking the time to talk through those and being a perfectionistic justice person myself. It's been interesting, and also becoming a mom of a gifted kid and not trying to put my perfectionism on him when he comes home with 80%, that it's okay. That's been an eye-opening experience. So it's neat to see both sides of it.
To add on to what you guys were saying, they need as much help with social protocols and social awareness as anything else. I mean, if you want a job or you want a car, you're gonna have to still stay in your lane, you know, or stay in your line or wait your turn. That there is a lot of time that needs to be spent on those types of activities as well. Because academically they're doing great, but it's those social pieces that.
Well, and I think it is that social piece, because I think a lot of times, you know, up until 4th grade, 5th grade, the academics are right, you know, and they've been able to almost have the academics as a coping skill to mask some of those other things that maybe have bothered them, you know, and so really just being able to work through with the kids And that it's okay to have these feelings, it's okay to get frustrated, but then how do we do it? You know, and that maybe they haven't had those opportunities before, or have their kids that are just as good at them at something. And then it's like, oh, well, let's please say thank you to your partner, good game, you know, but how to lose gracefully as well, you know, it's hard.
And I think sometimes they are become so accelerated academically and just are really realizing they're doing that. Maybe as they're reading way beyond their years, but sometimes their social emotional development is lagging. And that, you know, you expect that they're so verbal, they speak to you like they're 30, but then they're acting like they're 7. Yeah. Because they, you know, well, or, you know, mine are, but they're, but that is a real struggle and something that we work with.
That's something that I talked to, as a specialist that take the content replacement in 4th grade. We also sometimes get the privilege of being able to talk to or sit in on some of the conferences in our foster classrooms in the younger grades. And a couple conversations I just had at conferences in January were, parents that had young gifted children that were telling me, you know, they can do multiplication and division and they're in 1st grade, but every time that something is wrong, it's this crazy meltdown and they're having all these big feelings and these things. And I always tell them that the academics will come. You know, I always joke that even like in my 4th grade room, that there are times where I could just step back and they'd probably figure it all out on their own. But if they can take the time, and we can take the time in the younger grades too, to really get those kinds of things under control. And like when the academics are easy, practice all those coping skills and practice the breathing and practice the losing. I tell them, play games with your kids and beat them by a lot and see what happens and see how you can practice that, because then when they do come and in 4th grade and in 5th grade and in 6th grade, when the academics are hard, they have the strategies already. It's not the first time they're encountering, oh, I need to be able to calm myself down, or I need to be able to weigh how big of a problem I'm feeling it is versus how big of a problem it actually is. But they've been able to practice that, but that's something that they have skills already in, so that they can be more successful, just as kind of fun.
Well, and I remember the tears when they, you know, I have one young man in particular that I was teaching and the gifted specialist, and it never failed. At least once a day in my class, tears would be running down his face, and the kids got to the point where they would not do anything, they would not say anything, they just, you know, he's all right. And I had someone, a new principal, walk in my room and stopped me after class, and he said, you know, you had a child crying in the room. And I said, yes, I know. He's fine. Because I've had those conversations with him of, is there anything in this room deserving of tears? No. Are you okay? Just give me a minute. Just give me. And we labeled those tears for him. Those were his intensity tears, because it would just well up in him and the tears would come. And then he really was okay. He wasn't sad. He wasn't upset. He was just overwhelmed. And recognizing that these kids do have these huge emotions, and sometimes they forget that I'm 9. I sound like I'm 16, 30, but I'm 9. And that asynchrony is so huge with these children. But it's part of who they are, and it makes them wonderful. I oftentimes will hear someone say, well, can you fix that? No, they're not broken. They're not broken. They don't need to be fixed. They're fine. So let's go back to academics. What are the challenges that you see? We alluded to these a little earlier, sometimes in the advice that you would give them. What are the challenges in the academic piece?
In math, I would say they really, and this is global, there's shirts that say this, like they don't like to show their steps in their work, and they haven't needed to. Like they can solve many things and keep it all in their head. And you know, I always sort of mention calculus in high school. I go, okay, but when you get to calculus, you cannot solve that all in your head. You're going to have to write things down. It may take you front and back of a whole sheet of paper for one problem. If
getting them to kind of start that process now, so we're not trying to learn calculus and how to show my work at the same time of building those habits in. But I know it. And then around 5th grade, when they're doing 6th or 7th grade math and they're making mistakes and we can't figure it out because there's nothing there. Sometimes they have to fall down first before they go, okay, I see why I really need to start doing this. For sure.
Don't need making assumptions of what it is you're asking for, and they are 7 steps ahead of a completely different concept because they thought they knew and were just getting the ball going without really listening for the expectation. So similar, but
So, did you say they don't follow directions?
They make up the road first.
they made an assumption of the task that I'm asking for them to do, but easily corrected, however, just, yeah, they already know and they're 10 steps ahead of me.
Well, in that, test, we talked about Raleigh that hold up the test and say, make sure you read really carefully what it says. It says very carefully, you know, and I don't read the test to them, but inevitably, there are some that don't. And which is okay, because I want them to make mistakes in 4th grade and get used to that, but it's, I think because their brains are most of them, they process really, really quickly. It's easier to just read something and then oops. So,
And like with that, it's like the attending to precision, like we talked about mathematical practice, it happens to be mathematical practice 6, attending to precision, you know, and so we always talk like, what happened, did I read carefully, did I multiply and I was supposed to add, or, you know, just, I'm like, you understand the concept, but you didn't attend to that. So just kind of slowing down, which is hard when your brain's going so fast, it's hard to slow down.
They sometimes will take that too, and they'll be like, well, it tricked me. Like, why would it have, especially multiple choice? They'll be like, why would it have that answer if it's trying to trick me? And I always tell them, they're trying to figure out what you didn't read. Like, all 4 of these answers could happen. And they're trying to figure out if you didn't, you know, if you answered C, that tells me that you didn't read it right. If you answered B, that tells me that you did the wrong operation. And we kind of have to work through some of those things because they do think so far ahead, and so they get, you know, and they're like, but it was there. Like, how was it wrong if it was like, that's the answer I got and the answer was there. And so we have to slow them down sometimes and show them exactly, you know, there are different ways that we can see what it is that we're either too far ahead of and thinking around, before they can, you know, they're not just trying to trick you, or they're trying to, you know, they want you to mess up or pick
Well,
it
yeah,
up.
I mean, and I tell them like, the create tests are kind of neat. And that they're trying, like, you know,
They wanna figure it out.
They're very similar or very close, and if you do it wrong, you're gonna get one of those other answers, but why? A lot of times we spend like, not just the right answer, but why would you have chosen the wrong answer? You know, it's always not the right, I wonder, why would they have done that?
One other thing though, I think is a challenge that is, because the kids, I mean, and smart, they don't want to appear not smart, they don't know something. And so there, some of them, you have a hard time asking questions for clarification, asking for help. Sometimes they won't show their work because they know they don't quite get it, and so they'll just put an answer down. And so even though that's not technically academic hard, it's the social emotional part. It manifests academically because they, you know, if I don't get 100% on this or A+ on this, then maybe I'm dumb. So I just won't answer it, or I'll make it messy or do something so that I can still be smart. And so working on asking questions is great. You know, reading and taking more time, being one of the last finishers, that's okay. That's a challenge.
Rather than being the very first one,
Yeah.
and the paper turned down?
Yes.
There's no.
First, not on this.
Get points for.
And as parents and teachers, it's important for parents of gifted kids and teachers to remember that just because they're gifted doesn't mean they already know it. They still need to be taught. So often kids will join the program and they're like, okay, so can they go 2 grade levels ahead in this, or can they do that? And it's like, no, we still have to teach them things. Or like my son who's always been in gifted, And at home, we didn't teach it in the months of the year, and usually you do that in regular pre-K, but they assume, you know, and they probably know this already. But like the other day, he's like, what month is next? He's 7. I was like, oh, let's ask your teacher to do a little quiz and see if anyone else in your class needs a reminder of the months of the year. So just like remembering that they still need to learn everything that other kids need to learn. They're just gonna learn it with less repetition. And that's something academically that a lot of people forget. They're like, oh, it must already be in there. No, we still have to put it there. It's just gonna take less time for it to stay there.
Very good point, yeah. All right, my last question. If you had to pick a favorite resource to use with gifted kids, either a resource that you like to use, or a resource that you think families should be using, what would that resource be? Favorite resource?
I think I thought of it a little differently. Okay. In that I wrote each other. Very strong department, and we are very supported by each other and our directors and program coaches that I feel anytime I'm stuck, I like have someone to call, someone who's been doing it longer than me, or someone who has a better idea than me and can kind of work through and figure out what might be best for that kid, or what might be best for this lesson, or what might be best for whatever the situation is. I just think we have a lot of resources among us, and it's positive and we support each other. And so that's what I would do. Each other. I'm not even thought about it. I support you. I think.
I love that, and I, again, favorite, and also I don't think it can't, because again, we've got such a diverse range of kids, and in comprehensive, we're teaching every subject plus, because we're doing lots of things in one. And so there are a vast number of resources and what might work this year for this group of kids. Next year, maybe I have something different, and yeah, it is fabulous working with department because there's always a wealth of support, but I feel like our toolboxes are overflowing and constantly being replenished.
I agree with both of those. And also I would say open-ended activities, or anything where they can apply their creativity or prior knowledge, whether it's logic puzzles, or if they're playing with animal figurines and sorting them by the different habitats they live in. So keeping things open-ended, but for families, in more recent years, I've heard a lot of families that have sought out therapy services for either families, individually, or couples, and wherever you're at in the neurodiverse youth, just helping to kind of understand that you're not alone, and that these are strategies that work for other families, or as a parent, this is how you can be helpful, or maybe go and ask your teacher these questions or see if they've tried these strategies. So I think that's a great tool for parents to help them.
When you bring up a good point, because a lot of times parents of gifted children do feel very alone, because your neighbor who doesn't have a gifted child sometimes looks at you and says, well, you're lucky, you have a gifted kid. And as a parent of a gifted child, I always want to say, have you been at home with them? I don't always feel lucky. They can be very challenging. Yeah.
I know that I've had a couple instances where parents have come to ask me and ask, I'm seeing this thing, maybe especially if maybe they have an older child that wasn't, isn't gifted, and then maybe they have a second or a younger child that is, and they've, come and been like, my, third born is in your program, my other 2 kids weren't like this is different than my other kids, like, is this, is this weird, or is it wrong, or is it, and I, there's so many times where they'll tell me it's about perfectionism, or about these different, maybe some more like kind of neurodivergent things, and I always jokingly tell them, like, that's typical for me, like for this room and for this space, and I've noticed that sometimes that can help them feel less alone, and to not be afraid to ask your child's teacher, or to, if you have not had a lot of experience with gifted children, to ask, because it could be that is maybe not typical in like the experience of children in general, but could be super typical in one of our classrooms and with gifted students because their brains do work differently than any other child does, regardless of kind of what background.
And I would say just, it's like resources, like whatever your kid's interested in, you know, which is for every child, you know, but it's like the gifted kids sometimes go the nth degree on wanting to know about something. I mean, my son started talking about Titanic and he's 6. I'm like, okay, where did we learn this? You know, and it just goes and we just create and we just build and, you know, just, and also like, you know, it's like doing the hands-on and getting them engaged in something and just letting them learn what they're interested in too. You know, no matter their age, you know, if they're interested, it can go, you know, it can lead to them reading more books or finding articles or building, or, you know, just letting them explore too.
As a parent, I always want parents to know, we talk about gifted kids struggling to ask questions. Sometimes gifted parents struggle to ask questions because it's like, well, I should know how to do this. And it's okay to not know the answer to your child's question. Because when my youngest son was 3, he was wide awake and it was 2 a.m. and I'm like, what is the problem? Because his brother is, you know, he won't go to sleep, he won't be quiet. And I went in and we're sitting by his bed and I said, what? He goes, I just need an answer. For what? Well, we had been to, when he was 2, we had been to San Diego and we'd gone and seen Shamu and we'd seen the whales, but we were now stationed in Texas, and Texas also has a SeaWorld, and they also have a whale, and we had gone and he had seen that whale, and his big concern now is he understands how they got the whale in the tank in San Diego because they could swim it in from the ocean, but Mom, are you aware that San Antonio does not have an ocean and they do have a river, but that is freshwater and whales have to have salt water. How did it get there? And how did it get there?
And that's what's keeping him up.
And this is keeping him up at night. I don't know. I don't have the foggiest idea how it got there. But being a good mom, I made it up. So I said, well, you know, I think they probably have big tanks that have great big trucks that they can move it with. And luckily, the next day, we were able to do a little bit of research and Mom wasn't as dumb as she looked because they do have big tanks on big trucks and they rails. But those are the kind of questions that these children need the answers to.
Yeah.
And it's okay as a parent to go, good question. Yes, ma'am.
If I can ask another question, since it seemed like you guys are finishing up here, but a couple of you alluded to it, but what would be one thing you would share with parents about kids in your classroom in general, of course, but
Well, I if it was advice for parents, it would be, it is okay, let them fail.
Yeah, yes, oh, yeah.
Let them fail, especially in elementary school, it's very hard. And when we say fail, it doesn't mean, you know, an F, but like make mistakes, forget be late with an assignment, not do well on a test. It's gonna happen at some point, and when you don't let them do that, they get the message that we never can. And if they do, then they're not competent.
And then they're devastated though when it finally happens.
Yeah, and it will happen, and so it's so much better when it happens in grade or high school or 6th grade. Because then you, as parents, let them fail and then talk about what do we do going forward? Okay, so the test didn't go well. How could we help, you know, figure out how to study and let them learn that?
Absolutely.
And in my class, I love that we celebrate failure, and I would say that it's their first attempt at learning. Is what FIT stands for, you know, so I'm like, it's okay. It's the first time you tried it. What are we gonna do differently? You know, but I'd much rather have those emotions in elementary than middle school or high school when it matters a lot more, or college, yeah.
That's when you really start to see their growth. Is after the failures and the fixing and the pulling yourself up and moving forward.
help guide us as well, you know, where do we need to put emphasis in our instruction? I do almost a little evaluation in the first semester, which would be content, about content, just to see where they're writing that, if they can hear the sounds, put the sounds together, beginning, middle, ending sound. And you would think I am asking the entire world of them, because it's not anything they are familiar with, and just, yeah, letting them know it's okay. I haven't taught you yet, so it's okay that you don't know. I just want to see what you do know, so I know how to teach you better. But yeah, trying hard things, and it's okay if you don't do well. And that goes for all children, not just children.
I would say too, one of the things that giftedness really does lend itself more is academics. And so, you know, as a parent of a gifted child, like they're going to hear at school, you're so smart and you're so good at school and you're so good at math, and so my advice, and I have a toddler, I'm not, a parent of a child, but I grew up a gifted child with parents that really did incredible things for my brother and I, who both were identified as gifted growing up. And the fact that that wasn't the main focus of their praise for us at home, is that my parents were very intentional about praising our efforts in our artwork, in our, sports, and our Boy Scouts, and our whatever, all those other things that made us who we are and what we love, that weren't just school, because they're gonna hear that they're good at school. That's a very easy compliment to throw at them, especially because they are good at it, and
They don't want that to define them.
right.
Mhm.
Because
No,
at some
they are.
point, when school's over, then what?
Right.
What are they good at? What are they left?
So,
So we can open it up to some questions if we have anyone who would like. The only thing I would ask that if your question is student specific, please don't ask that. General, so that we don't get ourselves in trouble. Do we have any questions online that we need to ask? We good there? I always forget what we ask. Yeah, online, so. Yes, ma'am.
I have two gifted kids, very different from me. And I'm starting to see a difference between like honors or hardworking, quick to learn, and gifted, capable, but not hardworking, Do you guys see that? And like, what, like, do you still think that so like, my kids don't work hard and get good grades, but they are gifted. And so do you see that they should still stay in those classes?
They should, I think should, yes, that. I mean, for one, earlier when you said when they kind of feel like they found their people, that's really important. Yeah, I mean, we would never exit a student just because they didn't try as hard as someone else.
Yeah.
I don't know, yeah.
Well, there's such a big difference between, so we refer to like the honors, like a high achiever, like works really hard, gets really good grades, wants to do well. And then there's a gifted kid who wants to delve into what they want to delve into. So like, if my students do an independent study where they can pick anything in the world they want to learn about. And that's where I see their best work, right? Because the kid is learning about Pokemon or crumble cookies, but we're writing a 5-paragraph research paper on it. So like, that's what our classes are designed for. They're not designed for the high achievers, because they can do well in the regular classroom and be the top of their class. But the gifted kids, they also need less repetition. So like a high achiever is going to learn, but is going to do that practice, do the worksheet, and probably enjoy it and want to get 100 on all of them. But the gifted kid is going to, by the third worksheet, they're going to be like, I'm bored out of my mind and I'm not doing anymore. So here you go, and rip it up in front of your face. And that's okay, because our brains just work differently. So yeah, our classrooms aren't designed for the high achievers. They're designed for.
I think we've done a really good job though over the past decade of identifying the differences,
Yeah.
with even just with our gen ed teachers, or when we're trying to get them to nominate kids for gifted, it isn't your straight A student that we're looking for. It isn't the one who turns everything in, is super organized. We're like, might be under the table reciting poetry while still answering your question. It's all happening once. Like that's probably our kid,
open their backpack and hold like, fill out.
That's probably our kid, yeah.
And understanding like, when they do then have their people, or you structure the class differently for a gifted child, you might start seeing different attributes come out. And all of a sudden like, oh, I do want to do better in this class now because of this, or, because, and it's like, I have kids that just like, in my class and they're just like, oh, it's quiet in here. It's nice, like, they know what to expect. They know that, okay, during this time, I'm gonna be shouting, like, our class, all of a sudden the timer goes off, it's time to go. They're like, really? What's up that bad? They're like, yeah, I'm really sorry, but they enjoy that push and that challenge, just in a different with their people.
Also add that some of my students that blow me away with how intelligent they are, never have the nicest keyboard. It's not a mess, but it's done, it's accurate, and that's what I'm looking for, do they understand the concept? And are they being responsible with their time? But have to be perfect. If that were my objective, it'd be different, but it's not. So I don't know if that helps answer your question. I don't think they are perfectionists in getting it right, but not necessarily.
And sometimes that
Are some of them are.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
absolutely.
They're very diverse. I have some who are perfect at everything and talented. They are athletic, they're musical, they're artistic, they're brilliant. And then some here and there, and some are messy, and some are hyper organized. It's like, that's on this one.
That's our classes.
That's our classes. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Is it me? Okay. I couldn't tell if you were looking behind me. So if you could tell your 13-year-old something, what would you go back and tell yourself if you had that opportunity? Many of you have said that you were gifted students. So thinking back to you when you were in middle school, what would you go back and tell yourself?
Your paper has a smudge on it, you don't have to start over. Everything had to be organized, everything had to be perfect, and I had to have straight A's, I had to live up to that reputation. And I would probably just tell myself that it's gonna be okay. And
Take a deep breath. Like, it'll be all right. Don't like that. But it's like, it's okay if it's not like we're not allowed to say that word, but just realizing, like, if you're trying to get perfect, like, it's not attainable and you're gonna beat yourself up over it. So just like realize.
Yeah, I think I would tell myself that this is such a weird statement, but like, when you grow up, nobody's gonna know that you were gifted in elementary school. Like, the friends that I made in college, the friends that I have as an adult, that they don't know that about me, that isn't something that, like, you don't have like a brand across the back of your shirt, like, that says like, what you gifted at, or what, all those things. But also, I think I would tell her that like, even if people aren't gonna know, like, you will still know, and your brain will still be different, whether you're 13 or 28 or 50 or whatever it is, like, your brain is the way it is, and that's a beautiful thing. But that it doesn't, like, this word or this, I think I always joke that I hate the word gifted, because I think when I was younger, it like was complex. But that, like, that word doesn't hold your identity, and it doesn't hold this thing over you that you have to, like, everything in your life and everyone's gonna know and all these things that, it's just another part of who you are. It's just the way your neurons fire together, and that you are going to still, whatever path your life is gonna take can take any shape you want it to look. And it's gonna be messy, and it's gonna be beautiful, and that it's not,
it doesn't have to follow the plan you made.
right, yeah. Right,
That's part of it too, you gotta stick to the plan,
yeah.
and that it's gonna be completely different from what you planned, but it's gonna be awesome.
Say, just in all the uniqueness, you are, we were meant to be, and there's no one else like it. And also follow what interests you, because you can do really great things if you stick to it and follow your heart.
13 was a long time. Probably something like, try to get in more, because I think a lot of times it was, and I still do this, they have to make what's next, and so you just taking time.
I know. I'm gonna make it different other than a 13-year-old me. I'm gonna try to help her with procrastinating so that things were easier then. You know, but sometimes you have to just switch up, hit the wall at the end and go, okay, that failed, and plan ahead a little better. Yes.
Okay, so you've been speaking a lot about the social and emotional development, and it's amazing that you are allowing these children to fail, that they aren't always able to live up to expectations. And one of my things I think about with my son, he's an only child, is there anything done in the classroom that gets these children ready? You have mentioned like becoming adults and having jobs. I think like getting married or having partners who aren't gonna think the way they think. So is there anything done in the classroom that gets them ready to maybe deal with people that are, I don't know like how to say it.
We can be joking. And again, after 3 years, we can be a little sarcastic. If someone just heard this out of my mouth the first time, they'd be like, that's so. We say, especially in 6th grade, like, no one's gonna hire you. You know, like, there's something, so we don't talk about like necessarily those kinds of relationships, but like the work types of relationships. And when I say that, it's usually because someone has like spilled their whole backpack all over the desk, looking for that one thing that they can't find, and you guys are trying to also work, you know, of as smart as you are, you also have to function in a workplace and have some guidelines, and even if you're really cool and funny and smart, you're a slob, people still don't want to work with you. So kind of addressing some of those other areas. So we jokingly say, you know, no one's gonna give you a driver's license, no one's gonna hire you, wait it up, you know, and yeah, you know.
We go to recess and things with the gen ed kids. And so that is really where I see more of that relationship building. Because they will join in for like 9 square, 4 square tag. And so then they'll have those conversations with the gen ed kids and how they think differently. And a lot of times it'll be like overruled or something. And the gen ed kids will eventually just give up and walk away. And so it's like having those conversations. If you want people to play with you, you have to compromise and give. And so that's those things that we address for sure. And then also having your kid involved in things outside of school, like a sport or swimming or piano, like something where they're interacting with other people that aren't in their gifted class. That's a great resource too.
One of the things that I have written on my board all year is the word value. And so when we, especially for those of us that have kind of like pull-out style programs where maybe they're coming from science or whatever, they walk in my room and the backpack's thrown and the whatever, and I'm, oh, what's wrong? And they're like, we're doing this project, and they just like, they don't think the way that I'm thinking about it, or they don't, like, when we do projects in here, like, we all think, the same way or what, which is not true, but they kind of have that similarity in our rooms, but then maybe when they go out and they're, paired with other partners, it's hard. And I always kind of point at the board and I remind them, your brain works differently than their brain does, and both of them are worth the same amount of value. Like you and your everything about you.
What do you have on the board?
Value. And so like you're in everything about you and they're in everything about them. Like they are still a valuable person and you are a valuable person. And so when you go into that project and they are frustrating you, or maybe you are thinking that like, this is the significantly better or easier way to do this, or what they're doing doesn't make sense because it would just be so much easier if they did this. I remind them that what you're thinking and what they're thinking are both valuable. And just because you think that your way is better doesn't mean that it is, but it also doesn't mean that their idea doesn't get a seat at the table. And then when we have those interactions, it can be hard, but to remember, and I always try to tell them, take like one breath's pause to be like, okay, is what I'm about to say or the interaction I'm about to have gonna reflect the fact that I know that like myself and this person, like both are holding value in this conversation.
Well, ladies, I do want to thank you for your time this evening.
I know that you've had a busy day today, and I greatly appreciate your willingness to join us this evening. Yeah. Thank you very much, and yes,
We just have an announcement. So for parents in the room, we can finish this up. If parents in the room would, I have a QR code for a parent meeting and a parent questionnaire. So if you haven't gotten it, you can come see it on my computer before you leave. Thank you so much.
but thank you again for coming this evening. Those of you who are online, thank you so much for joining us this evening. And we hope that you got some valuable information. Ladies, thank you.
If you are a district employee, make sure you sign this so that you get,